Witness what it's like to be a non-binary pregnant person and then a parent. Hello and welcome back to I'm the Zaddy. This episode focuses on spaces that were not made for me. I have realised that through pregnancy, I translate information through my brain so it applies to me. Every leaflet, every brochure, every magazine, every form and appointment, app and even Instagram post. It feels like I am constantly translating. It feels extremely weird to be in a community where I don't quite fit. I had no idea that I would feel like this during pregnancy. I had no idea that I would have to translate every piece of information or that it would hurt every time I do. Pregnancy has been a joy most of the time, but it's also been full of tiny, tiny reminders that this world wasn't built with someone like me in mind. And it makes me question whether I belong here at all. The first time pregnancy language made me stop was that very first form for badger notes that I mentioned ages ago in this podcast. But the fear and frustration were real. The unfairness of not fitting in was hard. It's not my decision to feel the way I do, but I have to facilitate for myself. Badger notes made our situation seem abnormal and weird, and as if we didn't fit or belong in that space. The language of the form made me feel that I was alone, that we were alone, and that we genuinely didn't belong to a space that we had fought so long to be part of. On that day that I didn't fill the form in, nothing dramatic happened, but something inside me shifted, and by not filling in parts of it, it meant that we had to go through it with the midwife and explain our situation. One good thing came out of that was that our midwife understood that we were not high risk because we were an assisted conception, that we didn't have to be put on the outside and be consultant-led and have all these extra precautions. The whole badger note experience knocked me, and I felt the excitement leave me. But the dread of what was coming next really hit me. I felt as if I had awakened a beast within the system that was going to cause us problems at every turn. I was frustrated and I was upset, and it took me ages to let it go. My wife was equally frustrated, but comforted me through it, and I can't imagine what it was like for her. The biggest feeling was that I don't belong here, and the biggest emotion was that I felt like an outcast, alone and singled out. I think it was only when we had more and more appointments that I really started to let it go, and it settled in my mind. However, that very first midwife appointment did reflect the same thing. I got mummed and then talked about as if I fit into that ladies' box, and that continued to happen in many, many appointments and classes and consultants. And I feel like the unfairness within me has softened a little, but I still notice it every single time. For example, pregnancy literature and leaflets are incredibly gendered and aim towards heterosexual couples. I can only speak for myself here, but simple language changes would make it more inclusive and make a huge difference to my experience of the system and its professionals. The easiest thing that they could do is make the language less gendered, obviously. Make it about the birth parent, the parents, the caregivers. Instead of saying ladies, say patients or birth parents. It really can be that simple. When I was recently diagnosed with gestational diabetes, I was handed this massive stack of literature, and all of it was for many women, most women, and the diabetes nurse even talked about my ladies and most ladies. And it hit a nerve. It's triggering, especially when they know I am non-binary. And my notes say that. But it's incredibly difficult to navigate, as I want the best care for my baby and for me, and do not want to make it awkward or about my gender instead of their health and well-being. Honestly, it is exhausted, and none of these moments on their own are huge. It's the accumulation, the hundreds of tiny moments that quietly remind you that this space wasn't built for you in mind. But every time it feels like I sacrifice a part of myself when I let it slide. The alternative is correcting people every single time. But at 36 weeks, I just don't have the energy anymore. I still get that pang of pain every time it happens. I feel embarrassed that I said nothing and I let myself down, but happy that I've got away without a battle or an awkward conversation that feels like way too much on top of being pregnant. It's a hard line to walk. And even thinking about all of that takes effort and energy, let alone doing it. And you know, the NHS still has my name wrong after 8 phone calls. But I called them again. It's incredibly frustrating that they keep getting my name wrong. Miss on everything, and then there is a middle name that keeps appearing everywhere, even though I got rid of it a while back. There was this one time in the GP surgery that they actually got it right, and I was listed on the board as MX, and it was magical. It felt so good, and I had the biggest grin, and both me and my partner looked at each other in amazement, and then the next time it was gone. It had reverted to Miss, and it felt like I had been rejected or thrown out again for who I define myself as. The NHS do not know how to handle it, and it's a constant battle that I'm going to have to fight. The other thing that's been interesting is the antenatal classes. Now, we still have a couple left. Hopefully we make that, but we're going to find out. We have enjoyed them, but we have done a lot of reading ourselves and a lot of learning. So it's not always new information, but I have got mummed there, along with all the other pregnant people in that room, which was uncomfortable. But again, I translated it in my brain to go, this isn't about me. She said mum, she means my wife, and not me. It does make me want to write a letter to the NHS, probably after our child's birth, just to indicate how much this impacted along the way. I was super nervous before the classes even started, thinking they would be super gendered and heteronormative, and sometimes they are, and sometimes they aren't. They did assume my gender because I got mummed and my wife got partnered along with the dads, who, by the way, barely answered any questions. Me and my wife became the people who answered all the midwife questions because we knew the answers. But we had done the research because we care. I also consider my wife in all these situations and recognise that she gets lumped in with the dads rather than being a mum, which she is. Our child will have one mum, and that is my wife, not me. I might have birthed them, but I'm their zaddy, not their mum. My wife is their mum. And I know this may be confusing to some, but it's how it is for us. People assume they know our situation when they look at us. They assume they understand what our relationship is. Yet they have no clue. People look at us and think they've worked us out before we've even spoken. Outside of the NHS, though, I have avoided apps, and I hate those Instagram reels that start, "Hey mama," they are awful. For me, they are awful. And I instantly switch off. They make me uncomfortable and deem them not for me. Seeing mama so many times really does take its toll. The mama culture is real, and it makes me feel so icky every time I see it. I know some people fit that category, but my algorithm should know me better than that. I genuinely cannot swipe quick enough before the disgust and the uncomfortableness of that familiar feeling of not belonging creeps in. Even with pregnancy books, I read them and I don't see myself in them. It's disheartening. They talk about the mother and they say mum will experience XYZ, and it's difficult to read. I have to understand that the information applies to me without taking on that additional weight of translating everything. I would very much love to create a space with non-gendered pregnancy information and a culture that talks about the birth parent instead of the mum. That's what I'm hoping to create with this podcast. People have asked about whether we're having a baby shower, and frankly, that's just not us. We have thought about having a prepper party, but again, it's something that needs planning and preparation and time and effort. And currently, it feels like less of a priority than prepping for the actual baby in real time as the time winds down to their potential arrival. And with my added diagnosis recently, I had to change things up a little bit. We haven't wanted one, and I cannot really imagine us having one. And so I think we've sort of avoided it. And I think if someone threw one for us, I would probably be incredibly uncomfortable and would probably run away. There are some traditions I would love to uphold. I want us to have that first few weeks of our baby being home with us as a precious time just for us. I want that protected time where we all get to know each other and learn what it's like to be a bigger family. And to be quite honest with you, I do think that most baby related things are performative. The baby shower, the gender reveal. How can you reveal their gender when they haven't told you that yet? It's a sex reveal party where you tell everybody what kind of genitals they have. And it means absolutely nothing in our world. So why would we do it? If it's just an excuse to have a party and get given free stuff, then call it that. Tell people that. Own that. I've talked about this briefly before, but how often I decide to correct someone depends on the level of energy I have on that particular day. If I'm up for a conversation, I correct them immediately. Otherwise, I sink back into myself and accept that I am not who they think I am. And yes, that sounds terrible, but sometimes it's easier to accept than to fight it. Sometimes it's weirdly easier to accept the stomach knots and the heart racing and your mind going blank, and then to somehow find your way through that fog and carry on the conversation in whichever direction you decide to take it. Part of that decision depends on whether I or we will ever see them again. And that also, for me, determines whether it's important to establish boundaries early on. Even when I do let it go, it haunts me. It hurts a part of me that is unsoothable. And yet the fear of sometimes having to correct someone is greater than the fear of them continuing to call me lady. I'm not a fan of confrontation, but I am a fan of calling someone out and having a hard conversation when it's needed. But when someone calls you lady or Mrs. or woman or miss and they have never met you before, I feel like you can't blame them. But if it's someone that has your notes, like in a professional setting, and it's listed on your information, then you can kind of blame them. But the resentment will get to you. It always lingers afterwards. And I question myself about what I should have done, and I feel ashamed of having said nothing. Or I feel proud if I did say something. It eats away at me, and it's one of those things that comes back to me late at night when everyone else is asleep and I'm not. It runs around my head as if I can somehow fix it, even though the moment has passed. And eventually, I just push myself to shut up and sleep. Although the silence can act as self care, it can also be harmful. And walking that line is difficult. You never quite know where to tread. I don't, anyway. I got used to outing myself, but during pregnancy, I have been a little more reserved because, as mentioned, I wanted to be more careful about whether it affected the treatment of myself and our baby. That thought hadn't always been there. It's been developed over the time that I've been pregnant and had more appointments. Pregnancy has created that feeling. The feeling of carrying our child, creating that protective layer that meant my needs were already becoming second to theirs. And it's already changed me. Walking a tightrope of care and hoping that people don't treat me badly because of my non binariness has been a reality for me. So I choose when and who to disclose to if it feels safe, and always in the moments that matter most. I've been trying to think of what non binary feels like for me. And it's like carrying a small silent ghost. Okay, let me explain. It's hidden, it's invisible, and it floats around me, but it doesn't define me. But it's always there, even when no one else notices it. I don't particularly look androgynous, and sometimes I think it would help if I did. But probably not right now because being 36 weeks pregnant, it's very obvious I was assigned female. In a way, it's almost like all those silent illnesses and conditions that people have. And because people don't see them, they don't exist. People assume that they are well, and people assume that I am female and straight. And both tend to be wrong. And proves to me that assuming anything about anyone almost always turns out to be wrong. Let me finish on one thought I had in explaining what it feels like to be misgendered every day, at every appointment, or by random people, or those who I am related to. Imagine you have a thorn stuck in your foot, and every time you get misgendered, you stand on it. And you end up with that kind of irritation and pain because you get called or named the wrong thing. Eventually, that wound needs soothing. You cannot ignore it. It's just a matter of time before that wound is big enough to cause some serious, long lasting damage. But each time you fight back, each time you push back against the assumptions, the wound shrinks. Because eventually that wound needs soothing. You cannot ignore it forever. And I don't think anyone should have to walk around carrying an unhealed wound. That's how I feel about being misgendered and being called the wrong thing. And maybe that will help you, maybe it won't. I don't know. Let me know. But if anything in this episode resonated with you and you want to share your experience and story with me, then please do. You can email me at getintouch@imthezaddy.com or DM me on Instagram at imthezaddy.pod. Thank you for listening. I hope you join me next time. Peace.